The margins she left behind. Chapter 1. Saturdays. I began going to the bookstore on Saturdays because it felt like a reasonable thing to do. That is how I explain it. When explanation is required, which it rarely is, because no one has ever asked. People are polite about loneliness. They allow it to exist in the open so long as it behaves itself. The shop is the largest in the city, a converted warehouse with high windows that let in a diluted sort of afternoon light. It pools softly over the long wooden tables and the uneven shelves, as though it has nowhere urgent to be. The used books section sits at the far end, past the new releases, and the cafe that always smells faintly of burnt milk and cinnamon. It is quieter there. I arrive just after 2 every Saturday. I remove my coat, fold it carefully over the back of a chair. I do not intend to sit in and begin. I do not browse in the usual sense. I do not read the blurbs or examine the covers for intrigue. Instead, I select a book at random. Though not entirely at random, there are instincts that guide me now, and I open it. Front cover first. A brief pause. Then the back pages. My thumb slips between paper that has already been touched by other hands, lived in by other lives. I flip gently, never rushing, always attentive to the possibility of interruption. Not from people, but from something quieter. Something written. Most books are blank. Or rather, they contain only what they were printed with, the sanctioned words, the intended narrative. Clean, untouched, self-contained. They have nothing to say to me. I return those to the shelf. Occasionally, I find a name on the inside cover. A dedication. A note from one person to another that has outlived its relevance. To my darling on your birthday. For the journey ahead, all my love, always. These I read because it feels rude not to, but they are not what I am looking for. What I am looking for is messier. Marginalia, they call it. Notes in the margins. Underlines, question marks, exclamation points, arguments with the author, small rebellions of ink against the printed word. She used to write like that. Lisa. My wife, for 37 years and 4 months, and I have stopped counting the days, not because I do not know how, but because I am no longer certain what the number is for. She had a habit of carrying a pen everywhere, not a good pen, not a special one. Whatever happened to be in her bag at the time, she would read and she would respond. Not aloud, rarely aloud. On the page, no, this isn't true. This is exactly right. Reminds me of that summer in Cornwall, the rain that never stopped. Why does he think she would forgive him? I wouldn't. Conversations, essentially. Ongoing, unfinished conversations with people who would never answer her. Except that, in a way, they did. And so did I. I used to read her books after she had finished with them. Not always immediately. Sometimes years later, I would find her notes and feel, what is the word? Not surprise. Recognition, perhaps. As though I were meeting her again, slightly altered, refracted through time and paper. It was a second way of knowing her, a parallel life, running quietly alongside the one we shared. After she died, The house became too large. That is what they say when they mean something else entirely. It was not the size, of course. It was the absence. Our daughter, Danielle, arranged for things to be sorted, packed, distributed, donated. There was a system to it, and I allowed it to proceed, because systems are useful when one is not capable of making decisions. The books went last. There were hundreds of them, perhaps more. They filled shelves in every room, not in any organized way, but in the way of a life lived with reading as a constant companion. Some I recognized, many I did not. "They'll go to a good place," Danielle said. I nodded. I did not think, at the time, to stop them. It was only later weeks, months, that I realized what had been lost. Not the books themselves. Those could be replaced, in theory. Purchased again, retrieved, but not her handwriting, not the conversations she had left behind in ink. That was when I began to go to bookstores. Chapter 2. The shape of her hand. There are many ways to remember a person. Photographs, for instance. We have plenty of those. Lisa, at 23, standing on a windy beach with her hair in her mouth and her eyes half closed against the sun. Lisa at 40, holding Danielle as a baby, both of them looking equally astonished by the situation. Lisa at 60, in the garden, dirt under her nails and a hat she insisted was practical despite all evidence to the contrary. They are accurate as far as they go, but they are silent. Her handwriting was not. It leaned slightly to the left, which always struck me as unusual. Most people lean forward into the future, I suppose. Lisa leaned back, as though she were resisting something gently, with good humor. Her letters were rounded, open. She dotted her I's with small, decisive circles, not points. Her A's were always closed. Her G's looped in a way that suggested patience. I know these things the way one knows the layout of a familiar room in the dark. The first time I found it, truly found it, I did not recognize it immediately. That may seem strange, but memory does not always arrive in neat, labeled forms. It comes sideways often, disguised as something else. The book was a paperback novel, something contemporary. The cover had been bent at the corners, and the spine was cracked in several places. It had been read more than once. I opened it as I always do. Front cover, nothing. Back pages. A few faint pencil marks, perhaps. Someone's attempt at engagement, quickly abandoned. I almost returned it to the shelf. But then, halfway through a line, underlined firmly in blue ink, and beside it, in the margin, "This is lazy." He knows it's lazy. I stood very still. There is a moment when something lost returns to you that is not joy. Not immediately. It is something sharper, more precise. Recognition edged with disbelief. I turned the page. Another note. No, this is better. This feels earned. The handwriting leaned to the left. The letters were rounded. The ink had faded slightly, but not enough to obscure its intent. I sat down then, not because I needed to, but because it seemed appropriate, as though one should be seated for such encounters. I read the book from the beginning, slowly, tracing her path through it. Not the story I could not tell you, even now, what the novel was about. Something forgettable, evidently. Something she had argued with, and in places forgiven. What mattered was the conversation. She was there on every other page, questioning, laughing, dismissing, approving, alive in a way that photographs are not. When I reached the end, I closed the book and held it in my hands for some time. I did not buy it. That surprises people when I tell them, which I do not. But it would if I did. Why not take it home? Why not keep it? Because that is not the point. The point is not possession. The point is discovery. A conversation is only alive when it is found. If I were to gather them all, every book she had ever written in, every note she had ever made, I would reduce them to a collection, a museum of something that was once dynamic. I prefer them as they are, scattered, waiting, capable of being encountered again. So I returned the book to the shelf, and the following Saturday I came back. Chapter 3. The Girl at the Counter. Her name is Freya. I learned this accidentally, the way one learns most things that matter, not by asking directly, but by overhearing it, used by someone who had reason to know. Freya, could you cover the till for a moment? She is, I would guess, in her mid-20s. She has a habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when she is thinking, which she does often. There is something attentive about her, something that suggests she notices more than she lets on. For several weeks, perhaps longer, we existed in parallel. I came in. I went to the back. I opened books. I left. She rang up purchases, restocked shelves, spoke softly to customers. We did not interact. This was, in my view, an ideal arrangement. It changed on a Saturday in late autumn, when the light had begun to shift earlier in the day, and the shop felt, by 3 o'clock, like a place already moving toward evening. I had been there for nearly an hour, working my way through a shelf of older novels, the sort that are more likely, in my experience, to contain the kind of engagement I am looking for, when I became aware of a presence beside me. "Excuse me," she said. I looked up. There is always a small hesitation in such moments as one recalibrates, from interior to exterior, from the private work of remembering to the shared space of the present. "Yes?" "I hope you don't mind me asking," she said, "but I've noticed you come in every week. You always look at the same section." I considered this. People notice more than we think, or perhaps more than I think. "I do," I said. "And you don't buy anything," she added, as though this were a delicate observation. "No." She nodded, as if confirming a hypothesis. "I was just wondering," she said, "if you were looking for something in particular, I might be able to help." There was no accusation in her tone, only curiosity. I hesitated, not because I objected to the question, but because I was unsure how to answer it in a way that would be understood. "I am looking for handwriting," I said, finally. She blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Handwriting," I repeated. "In the margins. Notes." There was a pause. "I see," she said. though it was clear that she did not. It belonged to my wife, I added, because that seemed necessary. Another pause. Something shifted then. Not dramatically, just a slight adjustment in the air between us. Oh, she said more quietly. Yes? She used to write in her books? She did. And you're trying to find them? I am. Freya nodded slowly. That's she searched for a word. That's quite something. I smiled, though I am not certain what expression I intended. It passes the time, I said. She did not smile back. That's not why you're doing it, she said. There are moments when one is seen with a clarity that is both uncomfortable and, in some small way, relieving. No, I said, it's not. She glanced at the shelf, then back at me. Well, she said, if I come across anything like that, I'll let you know. Thank you. She nodded again, and then she was gone, called back to the front by something that required her attention. I stood there for a moment, the book in my hands forgotten. It had not occurred to me until that conversation that this could be a shared endeavor. Not in the sense of participation it remains, fundamentally, mine, but in the sense of acknowledgement. Someone else knows now that I am looking, that there is something to be found. Chapter 4. Conversations. The notes change over time. Not in their nature, Lisa was consistent in her approach to reading, but in their tone. Or perhaps it is my perception of them that changes as I move further away from the point at which they were written. There are playful ones. This is ridiculous. I love it. There are impatient ones. Get on with it. There are thoughtful ones. I'm not sure I agree, but I see what he's trying to do. And there are occasionally ones that stop me entirely. I found one such note in a book on a Saturday in early winter. The shop was quieter than usual. The weather had turned, and there was a fine, persistent rain that seemed to discourage all but the most determined visitors. I had been there for some time, working through a stack of books that had been newly added to the section. A promising development when I opened one and felt immediately that small shift in attention. The page was near the end. The note was longer than usual. If I ever lose you, I think this is what it would feel like. This quiet, not dramatic, not loud, just the absence of something that used to be everywhere. I read it twice. Then again. It is a peculiar experience to encounter a thought that was not written for you, and yet feels as though it was. I sat down. The chair was slightly unsteady, one leg shorter than the others. It rocked gently under my weight. I placed the book on the table and looked at her words. She had written this years ago. I could tell from the ink, from the slight difference in her hand that came with time. She had not lost me, not then. I was still there, in the house, in the kitchen, in the garden. I was still the person she spoke to across rooms, the one she called out to when she found something amusing or irritating or inexplicable. And yet, she had imagined it. This quiet, I felt, in that moment, something that I have come to recognize as the particular intersection of grief and gratitude. She had known, in some abstract way, what it would be like, and she had left me the language for it. I closed the book. For a long time, I did not move. When I stood, eventually, I became aware that I was not alone. Freya was standing a short distance away, not looking at me directly, but not looking either. "I think I found something," she said. She held out a book. I took it. Our fingers did not touch. It was an older edition, hardback, the kind that feels substantial in the hand. The pages were slightly yellowed, the edges uneven. "Page 142, she said. I nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated. "Do you ever—" she began, then stopped. "Yes?" I prompted. "Do you ever wish you hadn't found them?" she said. "The notes, I mean." It is an interesting question. "No," I said. "Not even when they're like that?" She gestured vaguely, as though indicating the weight of something unnameable. "Especially then," I said. She considered this. "I think I would," she said. "Wish I hadn't found them." "Why?" "Because it would make it too real," she said. "It already is," I said gently. She looked at me then. "Yes," she said. "I suppose it is." Chapter 5. What Remains. There is a rhythm to this now. Saturdays, the walk to the shop, the light through the high windows, the shelves, the pages, the small, persistent act of looking. I find her sometimes, not always. That is important. If she were everywhere, the meaning would thin. It would become ordinary. Instead, she appears unpredictably. A line here, a comment there, a conversation resumed briefly before dissolving again into the larger silence. Freya helps when she can. She has developed an eye for it, for the kinds of books that are more likely to have been lived in, for the subtle signs of engagement that might otherwise be overlooked. We speak occasionally, not often. Enough. Last Saturday, she asked me what my wife's name was. "Lisa," I said. She nodded, as though committing it to memory. "I'll keep an eye out for Lisa," she said. I smiled. "That's kind of you." This afternoon, I arrived as usual. The shop was busier than it has been in weeks. The approach of the holidays, perhaps. People looking for something to give, something to fill a space. I made my way to the back. I removed my coat. I began. The first few books were empty. The next two, I moved slowly without urgency. And then, halfway through a shelf I had not yet explored, I opened a book and saw immediately the curve of her hand, not in the margin, on the inside cover, a dedication. "For Leo, so you'll understand why I keep disappearing into these. Love, Lisa." I stopped. "Leo, that is me." There is a particular kind of silence that follows recognition. It is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something that cannot be spoken. I ran my fingers lightly over the page. The ink had not faded much. She had written this, I realized, not long before the books were packed away. She had given this book to me, and I had what? Read it? Perhaps. Forgotten it? Almost certainly. And now it had found its way back, not through intention, not through effort, but through the quiet, accidental logic of the world. I opened the book. There were notes, of course, many of them, conversations I had not yet had with her. I sat down. The chair rocked, as it always does. The light shifted, as the afternoon moved toward evening, and I began to read. Not the story, her, page by page, line by line. The conversation continued, not as it was once, not in the same voice, not in the same time, but continued nonetheless. This, I think, is what remains. Not the person exactly, not in any way that can be touched or held, but the shape of them, the way they moved through the world, the marks they left behind, and the possibility, small, persistent, enough of finding them again when you are not looking too hard. I will come back next Saturday. Of course I will. There are more shelves, more pages, more margins, and somewhere among them, more of her. Waiting